welcome to the Wellness Mama podcast. I'm Katie from wellnessmama.com, and this very short solo episode is going to be a look into and a deep dive on my nighttime and evening routine. I have also done a recent episode on my morning routine and felt like this would be a good balance because I feel like they actually very much go hand in hand. And this is something I've spent a lot of years dialing and tweaking and dialing in. And I wanted to just share some of the things in my evening routine, what I do kind of from mid-afternoon/sunset to sleep, and things that I've done to optimize circadian rhythm, detox, and nervous system, as well as my skin and my sleep quality. And just like my morning routine, this one is simple. Most of these things are entirely free. And I'll also share the why behind them. As always, this is just for inspiration and information, never for comparison or advice. This is never medical advice, just sharing what's worked for me, and would love to hear as well what's worked for you. And I'm going to just go through step by step, kind of some of the pieces of this routine for me and the why behind them. One that I've talked a little bit about and taken some heat for on social media, but I stand behind for me personally, is that I try to stop eating by sunset whenever possible. This is definitely easier in the summer when the sun sets much later, but this seems to have a very beneficial impact on my sleep. And here's why. By giving ourselves ample time to digest before we sleep, we can support melatonin production. Seemingly also has a beneficial effect on blood sugar regulation and digestive rest. And since so many of the body's natural detox things happen while we are sleeping, when we aren't in a state of digestion also while we're sleeping, kind of gives us a leg up for those things to be more effective while we're sleeping. Anecdotally, I notice that when I do this regularly, my resting heart rate is lower at night, which is one of the factors that most sleep data looks at for quality of sleep. And this can be significant. So in the rare times that I'm with friends or out late and I eat closer to bed, I notice about a 4 or 5 beat per minute elevation in my resting heart rate, at least in the first part of the night. And so just kind of shifting, if possible, stop eating by sunset or at least a few hours before bed when you can. I feel like this really helps the body to repair during sleep without needing to focus on digestion while we're sleeping. And as a bonus, just as anecdotal data for me, is I seem to have better deep sleep quality and heart rate variability on my wearables when I do this piece regularly. And the great thing here is this is not about anything to add in or anything to take or do, but simply the subtractive or the little bit, really just the timing seems to have a beneficial effect. And it's better than free. It's about just not doing something after the sun sets. I also have become more aware and curated my light environment. And I talked about this in my morning routine, how natural light exposure is so beneficial and how that starts our clock for circadian rhythm, for melatonin production, and for how our quality of sleep will be at night. And I feel like the other piece of this is being aware of our light exposure at night. My friend Molly Eastman talks about kind of junk light exposure and how too much artificial light in the evening is confusing to the body and how it can have effects on our blood sugar, certainly on our sleep quality, even on our metabolism. And this is one that I have kind of tweaked over a lot of years. But what seems to work best for me is that whenever possible, I turn off bright and overhead lights around the time of sunset. So in my house, I have broad spectrum, as much as possible, daylight mimicking bulbs in the overhead ceiling lights. And then I have lamps that have amber bulbs or red bulbs. And I try to make the switch to these at sunset. And it's the hue, the intensity, and also the angle, which are important here. So by having the amber bulbs in lamps, they're typically at eye level or below. And by having them there, that would be kind of in the same range we would see light from a campfire or from the sunset. And so it's about the intensity of the light, the color of the light, and also the angle. And so I feel like I'm able to kind of tweak all of those by having lower light amber bulbs in lamps that are at my eye level or below. And this is also about avoiding bright blue light, which is also sometimes called junk light. It's not that blue light is bad. It's actually very important. And it's one of the many, many things we get from the sun when we get midday sunlight. However, the body views blue light as a signaling cue that it's daytime. So when we get blue light at night, it can be confusing to our body and to our circadian rhythm. And that's potentially one of the ways in which it interrupts proper blood sugar signaling, cortisol, melatonin production, and all of that. I know this sounds like a very small shift. It seemingly has made a tremendous difference in my sleep quality. And because I'm definitely not perfect at this, when I find myself looking at my screen at night, I do sometimes notice a difference in my sleep quality, especially if it's close to bed. Some things I do here that also help is I do sometimes love to do creative work at night. So I use something called a daylight computer, which is a no blue light computer. It's similar to a Kindle Paperwhite in the way that it is illuminated, but it doesn't disrupt circadian rhythm, and it can work on airplane mode. So I often use things like the Google Docs app on that if I'm going to write at night, or even work on anything work related that's not going to be too stimulating to keep me up. I will often do that on the daylight computer. And if I use my phone at night, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see this on the video, but I use a red filter on it, so I'm not getting blue light through my phone at least. I sometimes, not always, sometimes also do red light therapy at night. I've talked a lot about, and I really support, when possible, getting natural red light therapy from the sun. The red light spectrum is available anytime the sun is shining, and it's especially prevalent at sunrise and sunset. So people like Dr. Courtney Hunt talk about kind of the free access to natural red light therapy when we get sunrise and sunset. And she talks about sunrise, sunset, repeat, and how those are very important circadian signaling cues. I had a very fun episode or 2 episodes with her, and I'll link to those. So you can absolutely do this at no cost by simply getting more time in the sunshine, especially sunrise and sunset. However, if you, like me, also have a red light therapy device, this is something that can be helpful at night. I don't do this immediately before bed, but I will do this kind of around the sunset or a little later phase. And I've written about red light before. There seems to be a beneficial effect on reducing inflammation and on mitochondrial support, which is a tremendous topic when we're talking about overall health. It's also skin supportive, which is why I think we're seeing so many things like red light masks, just red light panels in general. Red light for hair therapy, it's been used therapeutically a lot of ways. I also did use red light on my thyroid when I was in the healing phase of that, and now just enjoy getting kind of full body red light while laying with my feet up on the wall, which I'll talk about more a little bit later in this episode. But that's a way to kind of support the body. I don't do this every night, but I'll use it with my feet up on the wall while just breathing or journaling. There's also something I've been experimenting with recently called Cacao Calm, which is a blend of magnesium-rich cacao and adaptogens, and it's delicious for one, but I notice a beneficial effect on my sleep when I do this right before bed. I also love the ritual of something warming and heart opening and grounding that I can sip at night, and it's now become enough of my routine that it really signals my body to start getting ready for sleep. So I've kind of made this part of my routine of slipping out of go mode and into stillness. This is when I'm often in my room with low lights or candles, sometimes with red light, with my legs up, or listening to something calming, or journaling, or working on creative writing if that feels calming. I mentioned legs up on the wall. This is another free tool that I feel like is often overlooked that can be really, really helpful. And it literally is as simple as it sounds. Just laying on the ground with our legs straight up on a wall. So we're kind of making a 90-degree angle or an L shape. And there's not a ton of studies on this, as you might imagine, because there's not probably any money in studying just simply laying with our legs up. However, both anecdotal data and the limited research on this show this can be supportive for lymphatic flow and for vagus nerve regulation. It can feel calming to the nervous system, especially after a long day. Also, since it's kind of lymphatically supportive, it seemingly helps with sleep as well. And I feel I especially notice a difference from it on days where I've been on my feet all day. So this is one you can do for as little as 5 or 10 minutes and probably feel an effect from. It doesn't cost anything except a few minutes of your time. You can do other things while you do it. And I try to make this a part of my routine as much as possible as well. There's also, I try to build in some form of nervous system and mental kind of calming experience, like some form of mindfulness, reading or breath work or meditation or gratitude journaling. And I find that in the modern world, we don't make much time for silence. And we tend to try to fit these calming joy-based activities in around the things we consider necessities like work and family obligations. But I find that really, if we can prioritize a little bit of time of stillness, that it can have a major nervous system impact, or at least it has for me. And I view this kind of this time to shift from doing to being, because after all, we're not human doings, we're human beings. And it's definitely not about perfection. I actually was terrible at meditation for a very long time. I'm still not great at it. So I don't view this as trying to like follow a system or meditate perfectly. For me, this is about presence, not perfection, and just increasing a little bit more time for stillness and silence. I feel like that's a place where we can touch or like kind of access more our inner states, our flow states, our creativity, and our calm. And so this isn't the same every day for me, but it might be some days a guided meditation. Sometimes it might be breath work. Recently, sometimes this will even just be gentle, kind of slowy movement and getting in touch with my body before sleep. But some form of kind of grounding or mindfulness helps me personally transition out of go mode of the day into more calm mode at night, and it tends to help me not kind of get in that loop of thinking of things and logistics and all the things I need to do right before bed, which can delay sleep. I also at night often do some form of skincare and gentle lymphatic massage of some sort. So one thing I have been doing this year is doing an Alatura clay mask 1 or 2 times a week. And this, my friend Todd brought this to my attention again. I had done these a long time ago and then gotten lazy about it. But our mutual friend Andy Nilo created Alatura, and he formulated this mask after he was in an accident and had scars all over his face. And it was incredible. His skin looks phenomenal now. And he also looks so much younger than he is and has really, really amazing skin. So I like to do that a couple times a week, and I notice a difference when I don't do it. Um, I kind of vary my skincare, but right now I'm using a lot of Anne Marie Gianni products. And then an unconventional one that I've been trying is something called Magic Molecule, which is hypochlorous acid, as kind of like a toner on my face after I wash my face. And that's supposed to be microbiome supportive for the skin. But I noticed it also seems to just help my skin feel really healthy. I also kind of do a whole body gentle lymphatic massage. You can do this with tallow. You can do this with any kind of natural oil, castor oil. I often make my own with either whipped tallow or shea butter and beneficial essential oils. But this is just a gentle, slow lymphatic massage that supports circulation. I feel like this is really helpful before bed. And I'll open my lymphatic points like collarbones, around the ear, all the lymphatic points, and then just do gentle lymphatic massage kind of on the whole body, which is also incredibly calming. And just a note here, the skin is one of our largest organs. I think it would be a battle between skin and muscle as far as which one gets to claim the title of biggest organ. But we know that what goes on the skin, much of it can enter the body. And this is why I have a lot of recipes I can link to, but I try to use non-toxic and beneficial products on my skin whenever possible, since those do have such an impact on the body. So whether it's face skincare or products I'm using on my body or in my mouth, I try to make natural choices whenever possible. And I found as I've gotten older, I've also simplified a lot in this area. I'm not the type to do a 12-step skincare routine. I tend to keep it very simple with cleanser, occasionally exfoliator, Magic Molecule as a toner, and then some form of serum or lotion sometimes. Definitely, I am not a beauty influencer, so I don't take my advice on that. I'm sure you might have already a much better routine. For me, the big piece is just trying to put only beneficial things on my skin and avoid anything that might be inadvertently hormone disrupting or have something I wouldn't want to have inside my body as well. Skin is certainly a detox organ. And so I feel like supporting the skin is both beauty and healthcare, and that being aware in our choices here can make a big difference. Now, in my morning routine episode, I talked about my morning supplements. I want to share my evening supplements, and there's a lot of overlap here because I find there's a kind of the empty stomach component, and that certain things can be especially supportive before bed and in the morning on an empty stomach. I am the opposite of most people in that a lot of people notice better sleep when they take magnesium at night. I found out that I'm an inverse modulator, and so I tend to do better when I take magnesium in the morning. Like I said, for most people, that will be reversed. So magnesium can be a helpful nighttime supplement for a lot of people. I just take that one in the morning. But the ones I take at night that seem to have a beneficial effect on my sleep numbers, and I use an Aura ring to track that, are Pectosol, which is modified citrus pectin. And I really got in this habit when I was working on reversing autoimmunity, and it's made a big difference for me. It's now one I take to keep inflammation at bay, and there's a lot of really interesting emerging research on this, including, I mentioned, Dr. Isaac Elias and his research around this for cancer. That's not something I'm currently experiencing or worried about. However, I find that for the inflammation benefits, it's really helpful, and I suspect that taking it at night and in the morning on an empty stomach is helpful for my sleep. I've seen with the supplements I've mentioned for both morning and evening routine, a long-term beneficial effect on sleep when I do this regularly. I also often take some form of enzymes at night. So I rotate between mastizymes, one called dissolvidol, and just proteolytic enzymes. And these serve an additional purpose, seemingly, when taken on an empty stomach, and that they can help with kind of any kind of systemic inflammation and help with the body's natural detox pathways. Again, detox is not something we can do to the body. It's something the body naturally does, and we can support it. And I have personally found enzymes really helpful here. I recently did an episode about how I no longer have any of the markers of Hashimoto's and don't take any kind of medication. And from my own experimentation, I suspect that Pectosol and enzymes were very supportive in that reversal. And so those are most often the ones I take at night, along with sipping cacao calm. And I'll sometimes add in others, or sometimes also consume more minerals at night. But those are typically my go-to. I like to keep it simple at night. If I'm fasting or doing any kind of thing that's increasing my body's detox, I will also sometimes take a binder, like Carbon Cleanse or something like that at night, to help my body while it's doing those things and I'm sleeping, to help kind of remove those excess things from the body. I also put a lot of intention into my sleep environment, and I've done a lot of podcasts on this. I've talked before about how, yes, we create our environment, but also our environment shapes us. And so when we can do things to kind of optimize our environment, especially our sleep environment, we can get a long-term ROI from that. So whether that's things like during the day, shaping our environment so that we are sitting less and have more opportunities for movement, or for human movements like hanging or pull-ups or walking or carrying things. I feel like sleep is a category where environment optimization makes a tremendous difference, because once we set it up, we are getting the benefits every single night without any extra effort. And it seems like an area of compounding benefit for me. So that said, this is the area where I have spent money. These are not necessarily free tools. However, we know in now almost 1,000 episodes of this podcast, I have never had a single guest say sleep was not important. This is a commonality that seemingly we can all agree on, no matter our nutritional approach or what dietary things we follow. Sleep seemingly is a universal one. We know sleep is important. So I do make this a budget priority, which means I have spent money on some of these things, and I'm not saying everybody by any means needs them. I'm just going to share the ones that over time, this was a multi-year process, but that I've implemented and find most helpful. So one big one, optimization I made in my bedroom, is temperature optimization. And this is what I use is a ChiliPad Dock Pro, which cools the surface of my mattress and therefore also keeps my body cool while I'm sleeping without having to run the air conditioning and keep the whole room super cool. I also like this because it can get very cold, and so I can turn it down if I like and use still really fuzzy warm blankets, which I just enjoy. But that's let me really dial in and see in my sleep data the impact of temperature on sleep. And we know there is kind of an optimal range in the mid to high 60s that seems to correlate to better deep sleep. And for me, it seems much more energy efficient to tweak the temperature of my mattress than the temperature of my entire house. From an energy saving perspective, this seems more effective as well. So that's something I have now for probably almost a decade used in some form. I've had a lot of different iterations of ChiliPad, and I miss it a lot when I travel. The most recent thing I've added to my sleep environment is blackout curtains, which I will also link to in the show notes. These make my room absolutely pitch black, which we know a really dark sleeping environment, the kind of the factors you want to look at are cold, dark, and quiet, or at least the right kind of noise. This is how I have gotten my room absolutely pitch black. So once I close these curtains, which are either they're shades, Mine are actually electric, so I push a button, they all go down. It is so dark in my room that I cannot see my hand 4 inches in front of my face. So it's a very dark sleeping environment, and I also miss this when I travel because it really does seem to have an impact. We know this from studies that light impacts our melatonin production, and in my sleep data, what I see is an increase in REM sleep specifically. Now, when it comes to sound, we definitely don't want chaotic or sporadic noise that can wake us up, but some people find that certain sounds can help them sleep. So I will often have on either a sound machine with certain frequencies of white noise or extremely soft, very gentle music in certain frequencies that are seemingly beneficial for sleep. And I can link to the ones I use in the show notes. But especially if my kids are still up at night, which happens now that I have teenagers, they often stay up later than I do. That can help block out background noise, and I find that helpful as well. Now, another thing I have done to optimize my sleep environment is my sheets and the pajamas I wear, if I wear pajamas. And I've talked a little bit before about the fibers in our clothing and how they can impact us. And there's been a lot of talk about how most workout clothing in particular is essentially entirely artificial fibers and is basically plastic, and that might not be the most beneficial for our body. What I found is that I still end up wearing those things a lot when I work out because I'm doing things that lead to like a lot of movement and a lot of sweat, and those tend to work best. However, if I make changes in my sleep clothing and in my sheets, that's actually addressing about a third of my overall exposure for the entire day. And so I feel like this is a big impact from a little input. So I have 2 pairs of linen pajamas that I rotate, and I also have silk pajamas, and I'll wear one of those if I'm wearing pajamas. And then I also prioritized linen sheets, which I love because they're breathable and they're thermoregulating and they feel phenomenal. That was an investment for sure. But now that I have them, it's no cost. They're on my bed. I don't have to do anything. I also have a silk pillowcase. There's been a lot of people explaining how this is helpful for our skin, it's gentler on our skin and our hair. So I look kind of ridiculous at night in my linen pajamas and my silk pillowcase and silk bonnet on my head often and silk sleep mask sometimes. But I do feel like those are really supportive as well. I mentioned that most of the temperature adjustment in my room comes from the chili pad. I still try to keep my house between 67, 68 at night, just to really keep also the ambient air temperature cool. And then another one that I do that I love, this is a newer one for me as well. I had the founder of Jasper Air on this podcast talking about air quality, which is not something we think about as much in sleep environment, but it can make a big difference. Again, we're like in a period of detox at night. A lot's happening, and having access to clean air is really important all the time, but especially while we're sleeping. The thing I love about the Jasper is that it, for one, looks better than a lot of air filters, but when I run it on level 2 or 3, it actually works as a white noise machine as well. And it has a button to turn off all light, so it's not contributing artificial light to your environment. And so this is now something I have in my bedroom as well. And then if you kind of want to take it to the extreme like I have, I also now have an EMF blocking canopy, which is grounding and also blocks most frequencies. My phone actually won't work if I bring it inside the EMF canopy. And I feel like this has been helpful. I had Dr. Chestnut on this podcast, who is a surgeon, and he talked about how he uses an EMF canopy. And I ended up getting one, and I seem to notice better sleep when I use it. Again, it's a thing that I had to purchase and set up one time, and now I get the benefit from every night. So I know that, once again, was a lot of things in a short amount of time. And those are kind of all the factors that go into my sleep environment and my sleep routine that I feel like have helped me over the past few years as I've dialed them in. To really get things to a place where I consistently get really good sleep. What I have learned from all the experimentation related to this is the importance of light in many ways, but in natural light during the day and actually being in alignment with nature and in avoiding what Molly calls junk lighting, especially at night. I feel like light can be a very powerful medicine, or it can be a poison, depending on the type and the timing. And the great thing here is that some small tweaks can make a tremendous difference. I've also learned that sleep quality begins long before our head hits the pillow. In fact, I would say it actually begins when our head leaves the pillow in the morning with the morning routine. I'll link to that podcast so you can hear about my morning routine. But I think what we do throughout the day really can set us up for good sleep or not. Things like getting enough exercise, signaling our body with an abundance of nutrients, avoiding food right before bed, having a calming routine, and dealing with the mental and emotional aspects of health as well. And realizing that really quality sleep is an all-day process. I've also learned, and I resisted this for a long time because I'm a rebel by nature, but the body loves rhythm, especially when it comes to sleep. When we have a consistent routine, everything improves. And these have been incremental and compounding things for me that have really added up over years. So this has helped my hormones, my mood, my metabolism, my sleep scores have gone up consistently for a long time and have stayed high. Now that I do these, my encouragement would be to baby step into these, try them for a couple months at a time. You may not see a drastic impact if you do these things for one night. You might see a drastic impact if you do these things consistently for months. The body loves routine, especially when it comes to light and sleep. And I also have learned that small things like linen pajamas or changing the angle of light after sunset can add up in a really big way, again, over time. So I don't think you're just avoiding blue light for one night. You're going to see miraculous improvements in your life, but making this a consistent habit, you might notice really big changes. I know I certainly have. And I also think it's important to develop the mindset that mornings and night times are sacred. It's not about numbing or escaping. I understand that impulse and how when my kids were all really little, my only time of quiet and kind of a break from the chaos was those 20 minutes when they all went to bed before I completely fell asleep. But when we have the bandwidth, if we can create a little bit of space in our routine in the morning and in the evening for reconnecting and for allowing stillness and rest and connection with our body and really feeling into our body and developing routine that supports what our body's feeling, that the results can be phenomenal. And so I think in a sense, this was a lot, but also not a lot of things. These are very simple things. A lot of them are inexpensive or free, and they can make a big difference. And one lesson for me in these now 16 years of being in the health and wellness world is that the simple things are often underestimated because of their simplicity. And they can sometimes over time have the most profound impact. So I'm curious if you have already or if you will experiment with any of these things. I would love to hear from you if you have. I would love to hear from you anyway and hear your feedback on this or what you would like me to talk about in future episodes. And I read every rating and review. I would be honored if you would take 30 seconds and leave one on whatever platform you listen to podcasts. It helps other people find this podcast, and I genuinely love hearing your feedback. Please let me know who you'd like to hear from in the future, what topics you'd like me to cover, and any feedback that's on your heart. As always, I'm so, so grateful to you for sharing your time and your energy and your attention with me every time you listen to this podcast. I don't take that lightly. I'm so grateful you're part of this community and that you shared your time with me today. And I hope you will join me again on the next episode of the Wellness Mama podcast.